I'd like to introduce, for our next panel, we have our next panelist coming up. It's going to be Tim Terrio, Morgan Clayton, Jim Damian. Our facilitator is going to be Thomas Rockwell. Most of you know him as just Rockwell. When I first heard of Rockwell, I go, well, Well's a funny last name, but that's not it at all. So Mr. Rockwell is the CEO of Trout's, which is an 82-year-old business in most of those years in Kern County. I think most of us know Trout's as, well, back in the day as a honky-tonk. Mr. Rockwell is transforming Trout's into a digital entertainment area, bringing the Bakersfield sound even beyond Kern County. And a lot of things are positive going on there. So as a small business owner, it gives him good reference in order to work with our distinguished panel that I will let him introduce.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear everything on the microphone loud and clear? Yes. Yes, good deal. We've got three local business people here that are facing everything that everybody else has been facing here in order to keep business alive and well as we struggle through creating jobs in the streets of California and certainly the streets of Bakersfield. We have I'd like to bring them all up one by one. Mr. Morgan Clayton, please come on. Morgan Clayton is a dedicated member of the community. He's definitely a builder. Mr. Clayton has received numerous awards and is an executive board member for many civic, social, governmental, business-related agencies. His service and involvement with others extends to preschoolers, from preschoolers to senior citizens. He's a Rotarian of the Rotary of Bakersfield and member of the YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, a presenter and a consultant. So, Mr. Morgan Clayton of Tel-Tec Security Systems Incorporated. Thank you. Mr. Tim Terrio, step this way. This is a man that's certainly facing all that we're all facing here in small business. As a physical therapist, certified athletic trainer, and certified strength coach for over 20 years, Terrio has personally assisted thousands of clients to recover and function after injury or surgery, and has earned a reputation for solving complex problems with innovative solutions. Over the last 4 years, several hundred people have lost thousands of pounds of weight and improved their blood glucose levels, cholesterol, blood sugar, and fitness levels. Tim Terrio, owner and founder of Terrio Physical Therapy Incorporated. Mr. Jim Damian, please step this way. This company, Stria, serves clients all over the nation and is headquartered in Bakersfield, California. Before founding Stria, Jim was a child welfare social worker. His inability to quickly locate case files prevented him from doing his job of saving the world one child at a time. What began as an end-user frustration turned into a passion. Jim went on to lead the creation of Alameda County's award-winning online case file system, Stria. Mr. Jim Damian. Now, we're going to give each person up here about 15 minutes or so to explain what they face as far as funding, financing, and what it took to actually launch and continue operating their business. Mr. Morgan Clayton, please share with us your experiences in California.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Make sure I'm not speaking to the wall out there. I guess probably the best way to frame up my conversation for 15 minutes would be to give you kind of how I started and then kind of grow from there. Basically, 35 years ago, sat down with my wife and was running a security company at the time, and basically got disgruntled for one reason. They weren't providing good service, and most of you know that's the key. And so I sat down with her and I said, you know, I think I could do a better job of this, and she says, I don't think so. So, because she liked the idea of receiving a check. So I sat down with her, thought about it, prayed with about it over several months, and basically said, I think I want to do it. I said, but I need to know and get your buy-in. So she said, take this book. This is actually the book. And she said, open it up. And this is basically Gloria, who I've been married to for almost 40 years. This is our beginning budget when we got married. She says, if you can make this budget, do it. So basically at the time, I don't mind sharing with you, back then, our budget together with a home and 2 children was $3,000 a month. And I said, wow, that's a lot of money at the time. So the goal was to sit down, and the way I framed it up was I needed to have some kind of capital. And I will tell you that most of you who know banks or any kind of credit unions, they're risk-managed organizations. And what I mean by that is they have one philosophy and one only, which I still believe in today, that I was told by Al Haas, a gentleman who worked for a Purina dog food company 40 years ago. As long as you keep revenue in front of expenses, you always have a conversation. If your revenue is not in front of expenses, there will be no conversation. And so I took that to heart, sat down and said, can I get money to start this business that I really don't have any assets in? So what I started to do, the very basic thing I did was I went to my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, who were as poor as I was. And they said, loan you money? No way. So what I did was I took the $10,000 that Gloria and I had saved, and I basically put that at risk. And what I did was I did something different, and maybe this is a first cue for you. I asked people that I knew that were friends to match it. I said, I'm gonna put in 10, would you put in 10? So I got $10 $1,000 people to put it in, and that's how I formulated the first part of Tel-Tec. What I did secondly was I realized that I could not think 8 to 5 anymore. So I believed in 24/7, 365, because when you run a business, it's about making revenue. So I launched out, and I will say this to you, I did not quit my job at first. What I did was I worked on the weekends to test it, to see if there was a possibility that a minority could sell security in Bakersfield. And that was a very tough deal for me because most minorities were being incarcerated, not being celebrated. And that had to simply do with conditions. But I found something out. Here's the epiphany in all this, and I think this is one of those things that God gave me. I think it was really more about relationship. I went out to people and I started saying, hey, if I could do this, do it on time, and get it done for you, will you do business with me? And everyone said, why wouldn't I? Because if you don't get it done on time, I'm gonna fire you. So I proceeded to do that on weekends, and I will tell you that in the 35 years of doing business, we've never had a black year. Oh, well, literally, I mean, but yeah. You understand what I'm saying. We've never had basically as far as financials is concerned. And as a result of that, what I put in play are the following things that address the question. One, in the beginning, go to people of trust, because what I believe is people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. If people trust you, they'll put risk in you. So I started believing in that, and so I formed the company in 2 ways. One, to make sure that whatever plan I put out there had margin, which means that after expenses there was something left to invest in. And as the company grew over the 35 years from 1 employee to today, we have 60 employees that support 25 cities across California. What I found is simply this. I had to get to a point where I always went to the bank, and I think the speaker said it earlier, I always walk in and say, what does it take to build a relationship with you? What is expected? Each bank philosophy is different. A lot of them have a lot of special programs. I mean, I went to NITA, SBA. There's all kinds of different forms that go back, but I dealt with all of them. And the goal was simply to educate myself in saying 2 things. One, if you borrow money, you gotta pay it back. So I built a model that said, borrow the money, pay it back quickly, and basically build service contracts on the back side of it, so that ultimately what happens, I self-fund what I do. And then when the projects get large, then we go into banks and we partner with lines of credit, which we do have a line of credit that allows us to flex and manage, but we still pay it back. So in summary, and always trying to finish before 15, my beginning funding source is really the people I knew that trusted me, but I did shared capital. The banks, I think it became favored to the business once we had contracts that showed the value and the support, and really key, the discipline, that we knew how to manage the risk. And the other thing I think that's important is this, is when we did get in trouble, because I would be not telling you the truth if I didn't say we didn't ever get in trouble, but when we got into trouble, I went to the bank and I said, listen, when you go to something and you discount it, I made a mistake. I discounted it to the point to where it's going to be hard to manage the risk. And that's where the bank introduced me to a line of credit that said, you kind of screwed up, but let's shore this up. everyone breaks even, and then let's kind of get your line of credit so you don't have to do that, or when you do, you got a way to float it. So I wanted to summarize that. I started with friends and family. I then got into the bank where I understood what they wanted, and then I managed the risk through that, and then I always asked for help when I got into trouble.
I worked as a physical therapist and then worked for a big corporation, worked for a small local company out here in Bakersfield, and decided I don't play well with others, so I needed to go try it on my own. So 15 years ago, we decided to launch Terrio Physical Therapy. At that time, I was a working physical therapist, my wife was working. So we had bought our first home, finally decided let's go give this a shot. So I started with a second mortgage on our house. That's where I got my initial capital. And it was about $40,000, $37,000 to be exact. And we went and found a space. So the company I was working at before, my contract ended with them in the end of 1997. So fearing legal reprisal when I didn't need it, I was careful not to start anything until I put the plans in place, but I didn't start anything until January 1st. On January 19th, I opened my business. So we went into a whirlwind there, and it was literally, as most of you entrepreneurs have done, we were in there tearing out carpet, we were in there painting the walls, we did everything we had to do to get it open. So I knew I had a limited amount of money and I needed equipment to get started in the physical therapy realm. And opportunities show up, and that's been a line through my career, is to always keep my eyes open for when opportunities arise. And sometimes other people's bad luck is your good luck. So at that time, a local gym had gone out of business, and I started asking questions about, well, where's that equipment? Ended up finding out that it went to a reseller and they hadn't moved it. So they said, if you'll take it as is, we'll sell it to you really cheap. So that's where I got my initial equipment to start my business and got it at a reasonable price. Since then, just fast forwarding, like Morgan said, so over the last 15 years, we've grown from one location with one employee, being me, to 13 locations. We have 220 to 250 employees at different times of the year. We're now in Bakersfield, Fresno, and Tehachapi. So that comes, for those of you who are trying to grow business, that's when you got to be on the edge, right? So Morgan is good at mitigating risk. I like to play right at the edge of the cliff. So it's a little different world. I just figured out a long time ago that if we were going to grow quickly, I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And to my wife's lament, I've gotten a little too comfortable being uncomfortable. She would like to be a little more secure. So over the years, as that's happened and as opportunities have arisen, we've talked to banks, we've gotten lines of credit. If everybody here have a business, or some people starting it?
Have a business.
Everybody's got them? Because you'll find out, so my confusion when I started my business, I said, well, let's go to the SBA, get some money, and they're like, that's great, come back in a couple years. So if you're thinking you're gonna go down that route, you gotta get some history behind you before you can go that route. So we did the line of credit thing, credit cards, everything leveraged to where you can, right? But I think the story that you heard Brad Tribish talk about and Morgan talk about is it's that skin in the game, right? That puts a little more pressure on you to make sure you're really there. And it is, as you guys all know, running businesses, there's no 40-hour week, there's no 60-hour week, 88, there's no time. It's whatever it needs to be done. So we've approached it that way. We have been able to get some SBA loans over the years, 7As, and looking at buildings. I mean, you guys, if you walked into the bank, as Brad said, the time to talk to them is when you don't need money, because that's when they'll loan you money. But when you get where you need money, it's not there, right? Because the reason you need money is because your balance sheets and your cash flow sheets aren't looking good. And that's not when the bank wants to talk to you, right? So that's when you got to get creative. Today's cool because you're going to see some new stuff. I don't know how many of you looked into crowdfunding, stuff like that, or some angel investing. There's a little bit of that out there, but again, as you guys will find out today, or as Brad showed, it all comes with a sliding scale, right? The cheapest money is at the big banks, and then from there on it gets more and more expensive. or they want a chunk of it. So I think it kind of goes back, and another thing Brad said that I think I really like is I launched into this, you know, you guys are all pioneers of your life right now. You're building your life, right? And one of my guys that I just wrote a book and published my first book about this, about my experiences. And the guy I like to look at is Christopher Columbus, because I think he's a perfect example of entrepreneurs. I don't know how many of you researched all the way. We all know the story, right? 1492, Columbus sails, almost discovers America. He found the Bahamas, which was probably better. But he didn't set up a resort, he set up a settlement, which was a mistake. So, but what you don't know, but the story behind the story though, is that he actually, the first time he went to sail across the Atlantic was 1476, and he almost died. His boat wrecked, and he ended up having to swim to Portugal. That's how he ended up in Portugal. He married a lady there, was there, and that's why he originally tried to get the Portugal government to send him on his trip. He tried, as you entrepreneurs will find, he got turned down 3 times for his trip. Sound familiar? Right? Every time you go in, you get turned down. It's just part of being an entrepreneur. But he finally is successful. Well, he finally creates the world's biggest failure, right? He was trying to find a route to India, and he found the Bahamas. But his genius was in planning. He thought the world was round, and he had estimated it at about 63% of the actual size of the Earth, which was genius in the fact that he was wrong, but he hit North America, or he hit the Americas. So he had enough provisions to get there and back. So the next part of the story that I think is really interesting is his second trip there. He decided that he would, he went back and his little settlement got burned down because the locals weren't real happy. So he decided that he would force the locals to rebuild it. And when that worked, he decided that he would keep them and make them try to find gold for him. So then when he went back to tell the king what that he'd got this all done, he left 2 people in charge of the settlement, his brothers, right? So great choice of people. By the time he got back, the brothers had things in such shambles that Christopher Columbus was actually arrested, taken in chains back to Spain, stripped of his title of governor, stripped of all of his finances, and left broke. Now the beauty of Christopher Columbus is he somehow talks the king into letting him go one more time. So he gets stripped of everything, right? So to me, it's the whirlwind tour of an entrepreneur. I mean, you get rejected. I finally found some success. You make a mistake, a couple of bad decisions, right? Get arrested. Don't do that. Skip that part. But then, even when you get knocked down, you get back up again, and he goes down in the annals of history as, well, almost finding America. But he did recover some of what he had lost. So I think it's a great way to look at it. You just go, keep trying. You're going to get turned down. That's just the name of the game. And when you're trying to find capital. And you got to decide, what I decided a long time ago is we have to look at this of, do I need to take, because in 2008, a great thing happened. The economy collapsed, which led to a lot of opportunity. So the problem with that is everybody retracted away from that opportunity. I decided that we would go in a little deeper. So we've actually grown exponentially through this recession, whatever they want to call it. And I don't think we're out of it yet or anywhere close. But there's still those opportunities, so you can balance your books to make them look pretty, or you can play at the edge, which is where I play a little too much, like I said. So it's that balance of what are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? What are you willing to give up to get what you want? And then I think the biggest thing for people need to think about is, what are you not willing to give up? What are you not willing to do to make it happen? And with that, you just find the path after that. So there is a little bit of money out there, but it isn't thawing and flowing like we hear about, right? So if you can't plant a money tree, just keep working and driving the revenue. Like Morgan said, that's the only place to get the best money.
It's amazing, when we're doing business in California, anywhere, how such similarities we all share. And I often say living in your car was invented by entrepreneurs. You know, sometimes you risk everything, you put it all out there, but if we don't have that type of leadership, somebody putting these things out there, we don't have the jobs, the creation, the innovation, or the arrests. So, so Jim, Damian, share with us some of your experiences about launching, some of the challenges, and what it really took to get where you certainly are today. We're glad to have you.
Speaking of arrests, no. Real quick, how many people here by show of hands want to start a business and you're here to figure out how to get money? Loud and proud. Let's see it. All the way up. All right. Congratulations. Okay. How many people here own a business and need money for that business? Okay. Okay. Or maybe they don't need money, but you own it. If you're okay, perfect. Good. So, just was curious about that. Again, my name is Jim Damian. I'm from Tehachapi, California, and I was out to save the world. I went to school to be a social worker and moved to Oakland, California, and was a social worker. I was a child welfare worker, and I was the guy that Oakland police would call, 5 o'clock or 4:59 usually on a Friday night, saying, hey, we have little Johnny. He's 4 years old. He's in a diaper on Grand Avenue. What do we do? Do we take him to a children's shelter, or do we let Uncle Joe take him home? And so I would go to the filing cabinet, put the literally police on hold, go to the filing cabinet, look up Johnny's file, and as a social worker, it was all paper-based. So, volume 3 of 4 was there, and then you go to find volume 4 and look it up and see what's going on with this kid, and it wasn't there. And so I got inspired to solve that sort of problem. And so that's how I got into this world we call document management. And so I started working in the county of Alameda in Oakland, California. I switched from being a social worker to being a manager and tried to build technology tools to solve problems for social workers. I wasn't a business guy, I wasn't a technology guy, I was a social worker. I just wanted to help people and saw an opportunity and taught myself some things about technology and did that for the county government for a number of years. And in 2005, it was a dream job. I was building technology solutions for social workers. I was as happy as could be. I was working in the government and woke up one day. Some things happened at work and decided, I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to go do it for lots of companies, not just one, not just the government. And I like to make the joke that my wife, she fell asleep next to a social worker and woke up next to an entrepreneur. So it's been a wild ride over the past 6 or 7 years. And so, like Tim, I didn't leave my day job, and I walked this precarious line where I kind of had two worlds going on for a while because I knew I wanted to start a company, but I didn't want to leave I had a house and a wife, a kid, and they didn't want to sleep in the car. So I kept the day job and started the business and found my first customer, and then left my job and moved back down to the Central Valley to run the business. And that was in 2005. Now, how did we fund it? So, there's lots of philosophies on this. And if I did anything right, and I don't know if it was luck or divine intervention or just, I don't know what, the thing that you need when you start a business, it's cash. Cash is oxygen. And we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to, I didn't. I wanted to solve problems. I'm not an entrepreneur so I could make money. Hopefully, you make some money, but I didn't start the business to get wealthy. I started the business to solve more problems. And those of you starting a business, maybe you want to be your own boss. That's really not how it feels most days, but that's okay. You have these reasons you want to start a business. Oxygen to you is cash, right? Your first year. So profitability is great, but I would say, and this is my own opinion, and there's plenty of people in the room who say it's crazy. More important than anything, your first, out of the gate is cash to keep the doors open. Profitability, you got to figure it out. And if you can figure it out, great. If you can figure it out early, better. But you've got to have cash. So we went out. I had a couple original partners, and we all put in, our life savings. Each of us had $10,000. We each put in $10,000, which was enough. That was enough, more than enough to start the business. But then we also went out, and again, I don't know if it was luck or just good sense or whatever, we got an investor to match our money. And we said, we'll pay you 8%. And it was 2005, so people had, people were a little more freewheeling. So it was a local guy here. We said, we have this great idea. We're going to take, we're going to start a company where we take paper documents. This was our very first service offering, and it's still our main offering. We're going to scan these documents and put them on the computer so that doctors and lawyers and all sorts of business people can find what they need when they need it, just like Google, right? High-speed scanning. And the guy said, yeah, that sounds really good. And we already had our first contract, so he invested some money, and we promised him an 8% return. And so we had, basically $60,000. We had $10,000 from each of the owners, and I bought them out shortly thereafter, and then $30,000 from a private guy, and we paid 8% to him, right? And so the most important thing out of the gate, it takes more money than you can realize. And so to have some cash, that means keeping things small. Preserve your cash, hoard your cash, and save it. And then use it as you need it to grow your business, to run your business. As Tim said, when the opportunity strikes, so the opportunity's there, you gotta be ready to strike. So if you're starting, I'm kind of talking to the early stages, that first year, that's a lot of people call it the early struggle. Sometimes it lasts a year, sometimes it lasts 5 years, but that early struggle, your oxygen is your cash. Now, once we paid back that, I bought out my partners, we started to get new opportunities, and we were able to show profitability. Then we went to the bank, and we were very fortunate to get a nice 7A loan from the SBA. SBA is a great program, but anytime you go to the bank, and Morgan articulated this really nicely, you go to the bank, and it's a very humbling experience because you have these ideas. You're on fire about your business, and you're solving problems, and you've just invented the better mousetrap or the better vet, and a little bit of vision. And people can see your great ideas, and you go to the bank, and they say, well, we'd like to see your audited financials. I swear to you, when we went to the bank, we owned our accounts receivable. It was on a whiteboard. We didn't have QuickBooks. We didn't have anything. And they're like, well, we need to see your we had tax returns, but they want to see financials. So after you start to get some profitability, you start to track this stuff in accounting software. That's what the bank wants to see, profit and loss. But it's very humbling because that's your grade, that's your transcript, and as an entrepreneur, I wasn't too worried about that. I was worried about solving problems and making the world a better place. Who cares too much about money? We have enough to cash flow it. Profitability, okay. So it's been a rude awakening over the past few years. It's like, no, that stuff matters, especially when you go to the banks. So I would just say early out of the gate, I think the best thing we didn't get too caught up out of the chute on profitability. We worried about cash flow and making customers happy. And I think if you do that, you give yourself a running start, and then you really start to tighten up and learn about financial modeling and profitability and all that. But out of the chute, the first couple years in a new division, if you're expanding, cash flow is king, and you got to make sure that you've got that to the cash to survive. Because the sad reality is, depending on which study you look at, I'm speaking to the soon-to-be entrepreneurs here, or people that are starting business. 70 to 80% of new businesses fail. Those of you in this room have a running start because you've heard from two great minds here and the so-so mind here on my side. But you're hearing some good advice. You're preparing yourself, and you can be. You're in a great community here. Bakersfield is the best place in the world to start a business. So the odds of succeeding here are higher than anywhere else. But it's tough, and it's a great adventure. It's been a great pleasure and joy in my life to be an entrepreneur, and I encourage everyone to do it. But I guess at a high level, to summarize, we started out friends and family money, and then we were able to get some traditional financing, right? And you start to learn about how to price things and how to, as Morgan said, you charge some setup fees, and you can kind of self-fund different things. Anyway, there's a lot of war stories, and whether you've been doing it for 1 year or 50 years, it all comes down to, can you pay your bills? Do you have that cash? And solve great problems, make your clients happy, and profitability will come. It's there. But if you're solving some great problems for your clients, your stakeholders, the rest usually falls into place. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'll be around most of the day. If I can answer any questions or meet anybody in person, I'd love to do it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. We're going to open up for some Q&A. We have some questions for these three business people. Yes, sir.
Well, and Jim, for you, at the beginning of your presentation, you asked two questions. I'd like you to ask the third. Who's here to invest?
That's a great question. Who's here to invest some money for the next great idea? We have one. We have two. Only two brave souls to raise their hand?
I'd like to see both of you at the end of the meeting.
Yes. There's probably more, but Look, especially in the Central Valley, there are people, if you show them a great idea, you're gonna get somebody's attention. So start with those two, ask around. I'm sure there's more here.
Good question. Next question. We've got all these entrepreneurs in the room, and we got our next question.
In your opening statement, or shortly thereafter, you said you weren't a business guy, you were just on the solve problem. And for all three of you, you were experts in a field where you had a passion to pursue, but you were not necessarily business people. How did you break, or how did you get to the point of actually managing and continuing business?
Let me repeat the question so the people on here in the back of here. What he had asked was, these gentlemen up here were professionals in the field, and how did they make and bridge that transition to become business, to do the business portion of their ventures? Clayton?
Well, for me, it's really summarized down, it was really this. I knew that I had a gift of being able to engineer. I wanted to be an architect, but because my parents passed away early and I realized it cost money to go to college, it was like, whoa. And my father was at the time he was alive, was very disciplined, where he did not believe in welfare. He just said, reach in your pocket, what's in your pocket's what you can buy. What do you got? I got nothing. He said, then you got to start working. So, and so I basically started building from that. But here's the answer to the question. When you look at the fact that you have experiences, skill sets, or you realize you're very good at what you do, because Bakersfield has got some wonderful entrepreneurial people in mechanic, agriculture. I mean, I've met some amazing people that do some amazing stuff with water and everything else. My backdrop was, I started at the time, I will tell you, the heroes of my life would be the people who I know that had experience. You got like Ray December out there, you got Jeff Johnson. These are people that know me way back. So when I look at Bakersfield College, Cal State, NITA, SCORE, SBDC, I could take you on and on and on, that back to make my milk when I was playing basketball, I guess. But what it boiled down to was I sat down with people and said, what does it take to be successful? And I'll give you this one thing that I can summarize all these years down, that Al said to me one day. Define for me your value and your worth. Tell me what you're worth. At the time I was working at Clark's Boiler, making $1.65 washing dishes in the kitchen. And this guy was the VP of Arena Dog Food Company, and he really liked me because I liked to talk. I knew that's what it was. And keep his coffee hot. Well, when he asked me the value and worth question, you know what we all relate back to? What we make per hour. I said, well, my value and worth, I'm making about $1.65. And he looked at me and said, but what's your value? And I didn't understand the question. I was like going to school, getting education, but didn't understand entrepreneurism. And what he meant was, and I'll give you this, and I'll let this slide over, then we can talk more. He said, show me your check stub. Now, most of the guys can relate to this, probably the ladies can, but most guys keep that check stub. That first one, you keep it for a long time because it's real money. It's yours. You earned it. Mine was $135 for 2 weeks worth of work. I laid that in front of him. I stuck my chest out. I said, that's money. That's value. I was proud of my check. And you know what he did? He said, I don't want to offend you, but can I show you my check for 2 weeks? I just got my check. It was $10,000. I said, you must be selling drugs, man. I said, what are you doing? I said, nobody gets a check for that much money. And what he said was, I want you to think of Safeway, Vons, I think Alpha Beta, and all these markets. He says, all of them have Purina dog food. And I get a few cents off of each one of those, and I've got salespeople. I'm the VP of marketing. That's the kind of money you get when you can work hard and think smart. And you know what? I never forgot that, and I started going, what the heck? It wasn't a color thing. It was simply, how do I transform this one thing? And I'll give you this and pass along. God gives everybody 24 hours. That's all you get. I don't care how rich you are, how poor you are, you only get 24 hours. In that 24-hour period, how are you transforming your life? Number one, the law I believe in, you got to take care of yourself. Then you take care of your family. Then you take care of your community. How do you do that? And he taught that with all these people I met. I pulled that together and I realized Your value and your worth is based on what you're able to get people to believe and do, and what you come along and show them. And that's more than a 1-minute summary, but it's define your value and your worth, and I'll show you your life.
So it's exactly that, right? It's the way most people go into businesses, like the E-Myth Revisited. I don't know how many of you read the book E-Myth, because it is a myth, right? It's great that you have your dreams, your visions, but all of a sudden when you put that shingle up, it becomes real. And you go very quickly from being an entrepreneur to a business person. So I'd been working as a physical therapist. When I decided to make that jump, I knew number one, I needed to start learning. So I tell people the last 15 years I've learned more than I did through the first 3 college degrees. And I knew there was a couple different things. One was books. So I started reading anything I could get my hands on. E-Myth, over the years, Blue Ocean Strategy, all these books that were out there. And then I did something else. I thought, I really want to understand this. So I can first, there's a power you have when you're a physical therapist. It's called pain. So I had some patients and people I knew, like, would you be willing to help me out? If not, I'll keep twisting your arm. So, no, I actually approached some people that I knew around town. One of them's John Pryor, and I still appreciate it. I put together an advisory board and went to him and I said, hey, look, I don't know what I'm doing, but if I could put together a board of about 3 or 4 or 5 people that understand business, would you help me out? And I said, I don't have anything to pay you. Other than the gratitude of knowing what would happen if you started it the right way. So I got some invaluable advice from them. We got the employee handbook in place really early, because employee, that word changes your life. I mean, when you go from being an employee to having an employee, the world is totally different. Then as you add, it's like somebody told me years ago when I had kids, right? They said, kids don't add up, they exponentially increase, right? Well, employees exponentially increase. Problems don't add up with employees. The more employees you have, it exponentially increases your issues. So that was one of the things I thought was really valuable early. And then just, having somebody to talk to. All 3 of us have been in YPO. Morgan and I still are. Jim's coming back now, soon. No, I'm off the board, you don't have to worry. So it's that, and the cool thing of YPO, it's an international organization. There's about 20,000 members around the world. You have to be at a certain level of business. You have to have 50 employees, and you have to have a certain amount of sales to get into it. But it gives you access to unbelievable people to talk to. But there's other organizations like that. There's Entrepreneur Organization, EO. There's different groups like that put you with peers, because part of my research shows that it's not a nature versus nurture argument, right? Our DNA gives us certain things, our height, our skin color, our eye color, stuff like that. But everything else you can change. So your brain is like a muscle, right? The more you use it, the better it gets. So as we develop and grow, we are products of the people that we're around and the things we experience. But for some reason, when we become an adult, we forget that. We think, okay, if you want to know, where you're going, take a look at who you hang out with, right? The people you hang out with are pretty much an indication of what you've got going on. So try to get with those people. Try to get with the successful people, and not just to be around them and listen to their stories and pick up that little bit of advice. And it's amazing what you pick up. Like in YPO, we have presentations. Occasionally I learn something from those, but what I always learn from is sitting next to guys like this and listening to them talk and asking them questions. How do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? But to wrap it up, in my mind, you've got to be a lifelong learner. You've got to constantly learn. You've got to constantly grow, and just have your eyes open for possibilities.
Amen. Jim, did you want to add to that
I
question?
think that I don't have anything to add other than what was already said.
Absolutely. Great vast array of good answers there. Is there any more questions here before wrapped up to get to start with the exhibits? Yes, ma'am.
Is it wise, if your home is paid off, my vehicles are paid off, is it wise to try to take and get a mortgage against your house?
Jim, did you want to start with that one?
Business?
As you smile on that
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, do you want to repeat the question? Or do you want me? The
Yes.
question is, what is it wise if, you know, you have a home and cars or other assets that are paid off to get another mortgage or leverage those to fund your business? That's the question, right? So, two answers. Is it wise? Statistically speaking, no. Statistically speaking, most businesses fail. So statistically speaking, it's absolutely not wise to do what we're doing, what you're thinking about doing. No. The textbook answer is do not do it. It's like Bugs Bunny. When Bugs Bunny reads the book about gravity, he can't walk on air anymore, right? He falls down. So wise, probably not. Should you do it? 100%. I absolutely think if you have the passion inside you to bet on yourself and to start something, and you have that passion, and you've talked to people, and you're hearing yeah, and your heart's telling you yeah, absolutely do it. There's no better place to invest than in yourself. Except for Stria, if you have a lot of extra money, we'd be happy to talk to you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding about that, sort of. I mean, I'm not really. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, I think that's the best way to go. I mean, wise? Absolutely not. Bold, enjoyable, enriching? Heck yes.
Absolutely. Is there any other, that kind of touches that pretty nail on the head there. Is there another question here we'd like to ask? Oh, we got a couple more here. Yes, sir.
First and foremost, thank you for all the good advice and sharing your experience. This is a question that I have. I would like to seek everybody's to validate the way that I think, and of course you guys. I have an accounting practice for past 30 years, about 12 years of it in Bakersfield. Of course, I volunteer at school, which is probably most of you guys familiar. We help the startup businesses and doing financial counseling and mentoring business owners. What I have experienced through my own practice with some of my clients for the past few years, I think the banks are become a little bit harder to give loans. But keep that in mind, for the past few years, maybe started 2006, 2007, they haven't doing very much loan. So, and they are in business of giving loans. So what I have experienced for the people, few of my clients in fact, when their books are legit, they do diligence and blah, meet all those requirements, they got their loans. And for what we experiencing through some of the statistics at the school, there are lots of SBA, quantity-wise, dollar-wise, so many other institutions, they call them alternative lending. They are also, lending money. So am I thinking it right? Do you guys agree? Have you guys also experienced it the same? So what's your opinion?
If you could summarize that question into one sentence.
Well, is it easier for whether it's a startup business owners or whoever existing business owners wants to get loans? Would the possibility be there that the banks would give out the loans?
So I think just in summary, is it better to reach out to your closer network or to reach directly out to a bank?
I think, in my experience, that the banks are under still incredible pressure, at least talking to the bankers that I know. A lot of times they'll tell you, look, I'd love to do this, but we can't because of the ugliness that was created by, Lehman's and all that. Then you get this increased regulation. So we go to the banks and say, hey, look, you know what, I could really use this money. I got this great idea. We're going to save the world. And they go, that's great, but I have to take your paperwork and I have to show it to the regulators. They have to jump through hoops too. So I think it's that weird thing for them too, especially like the community banks that normally in the past would have done it. They can't now because they're under such scrutiny from regulators that they can't. They'll tell you, I'd love to do it, but I can't because of having to prove to the FDIC and all those guys what you're doing. So I still think to start, I don't know if the bankers, and stay with me on this, but I don't think banks are giving any startups cash because the numbers are bad. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done. I think it's just when you're going to go into it, you got to know you're fighting an uphill battle. It's not, you know, if you're going into business for the startup people, if you're going into the business because it's easier, wrong answer. It's not easier. It's going to be. It's one of the greatest things, and I'm happy I did it, and I love what I do. But it isn't because it's easy. It's because it's challenging, and it's the challenge that's the reward. So, and like Jim, you got to get into what are you doing it for too. The other mistake a lot of new businesses make is they're doing it to make money. And if you go into something and thinking you're going to make a lot of money, and you can't grind it out, right? A lot of business, I believe, is just the grit. Do you have the tenacity to stay with it? You know, keep grinding it out day after day. But if you think the money's going to come rolling in, if it does, call me because I'll invest in that.
You know, I think that probably the sweet spot in what you're asking is how do you find the money? And I think that for somebody who's a believer, a dreamer, you know, I can only say that what you have to do is a couple of things. One, look at the answer no as feedback. Because what I did was when I went to the bank and I got 3 no's on my SBA note, you know, I said, this doesn't make any sense. I work with these consultants, I work my tail off, I tell them everything I got, which is little or nothing. And when they tell me no, so what I do is I reverse it. I did what I call a 360. And my pastor, my church told me this one. He said, well, think differently. And I did. So you know what I did? I actually went to a banker and I bought him lunch on Saturday. And I said, what am I doing wrong? And he says, you're not doing anything wrong. Think of it this way. You have these people who are managing money. It's not their money. They're managing money. They're given criteria out of the people applying to select the people they think will pay it back in a timely manner, hopefully early, so that the investors who put the money in will get what they put into it so the economy grows. When you plug in what you do, at the time I went to the bank and said, you know, I got this AT&T model. I remember this, I laughed hard. He goes, what do you mean? I said, everybody in here has an AT&T phone, right? He goes, yeah. I said, people, whether they live, die, or whatever, they pay every month to AT&T, but they have no idea where the money goes, but everybody pays. You pay your power bill, you pay your phone bill, and every one of us pay it. Well, that goes into some kind of funding, right? So I said, well, why can't I do it that with security, where everybody pays me to protect them? And my dad said, okay, I got it. Black guy is going to protect everybody in Kern County. Yeah. And, you know, we joked about it. And I laughed about it, but then my friend said, no, keep pursuing it. And you know what it was? I talked to Jeff Johnson and people like that, and I realized, you know, when you have something that people need, and I can tell you, security is a very important thing if you connect it to safety, to risk management. It's all out there. I found that the space, which was the insurance companies, which are the mitigators of risk, and I said, what do you expect it to look like? And they said, here are the things that people have to have car insurance, they have to have homeowners, and I connected to those things. I'll give you my first sweet spot. I realized that every building that had to have a sprinkler system, like this building, the little things you see there, they're required by law to test those things. And so I started going around saying, hey, do you have that tested? Here's the code. They go, didn't even know it. I said, I'll do it for X. Okay. And X was within their framework. And I just kept Xing right along until I go, whoa, don't tell anybody about that. And that's how well, I have a master. But the goal is just to find a sweet spot where you can multiply your vision. And here's how it works. The lady that asked about, do I put my home up to manage something I've always dreamed about? Well, your home is your biggest investment, right? The key is there's nothing wrong with taking out a second, but just don't take out 80 to 90% of it. How about taking out 10% of it where you're making the monthly payment anyway, the bank's gonna trust you to do a second because you paid off the note, but just don't put yourself at risk. And what they're saying is, most people, well, I'll blind myself, slate the whole the whole liquidity against their home out there, and that's not the right thing to do. 10%, I'd go for that, because at the end of the day, if you fold up, you can pay it back. But find out where your risk is, and all of us are different. All the way we spend cash, manage cash, and some people are risk takers. I say God bless them. I'm just a conservative. I just say, you know what, I got $1. My wife's got to get 50% of that, or she's going to claim it's mine anyway. I got a loving wife, seriously. But the real goal is manage the risk. And I think once you learn how to create the language and managing your risk and what you do, the banks will listen, because that's what they do every day. Look at Wall Street, look at everything else. When people don't get what they expect, what do you tell them? If your employee doesn't show up on time, what do you tell them? If your kids eat too much of the wrong thing, what do you tell them? If your salespeople go out every day, 40 hours a week, and they come back and says, God, I didn't sell one thing, what do you tell them? Right after you give them a buy. So think about it. How do you manage risk, and what does that look like? And I tell people, if you can get with some of the consultants out here, I know some of them write books and do things, what does it look like, and start finding out where your sweet spot is. But I will say in a positive way, because I want to make sure that this is positive. You can find investors. I like to invest, but most of my investing, honestly, is in buying security companies who don't manage very well. If somebody says to me, come and let me show you how to be a therapist or do file management, that's not in my wheelhouse. I don't know what that is. And I probably would say, hey, I'll give you what I know, but cash is not where we're going to start. We're going to start at me directing you where people who are smart at what they do. So I want to make sure I frame that up so that you don't think Morgan's got a bunch of money to loan. I invest in what I do, and I keep it moving. That's what I do. Anyway.
Good answers. We have about 3 more minutes to stay on our timeline. Is there one final question?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I have to preface it though, so please indulge me. I get this great chance. Last week was the inaugural Distinguished Speaker Series at CSUB, and maybe some of you came out to see Elon Musk speak. And one of the things that he talked about was, and Elon Musk, for those that don't know, he co-founded PayPal, sold it for $1 billion or so, and then invested it in 3 more companies, SpaceX, which was in Kern County for a while, Tesla Motor Company, and Solar City. And during his presentation, he hit that access to capital moment because he talked about 2008, which for him was his darkest year yet. And in 2008, which was during the crisis of the financial market meltdown, he could not get capital for any of his 3 businesses. And from what I recall, he said something like he was about this close to a nervous breakdown. And he was fortunate to get a grant for SpaceX from the federal government, from NASA, which kept that business going, which then in turn has fueled everything else and has made him very successful at this point. But in 2008, he almost lost everything. So my question to the panelists, and you might have maybe hit on this a little bit earlier, but do any of you have that nervous breakdown moment anytime during building your businesses?
Yeah, well, that's great. Elon Musk was fantastic. And so there's this term, I'll keep this very brief, that I heard at an Inc. 5000 conference. It's called entrepreneurial terror. And I think that's the term I associate with that moment of, I mean, you're putting everything out there, or 80 or 90% of everything, or depending on your risk factor, you've put something out there. And there are often those moments where you have that entrepreneurial terror and you think, what am I doing? And you can't turn back. You're already halfway there. Going back is just as long as getting through. So yeah, I think that feeling is fairly common. At least it has been for me over my career. Anytime you're trying to grow, it absolutely is common. The beauty of it, and Elon Musk ended his story, he got the phone call the 11th hour from NASA saying, we've just approved $1 billion. As an entrepreneur, you might not get a phone call for $1 billion, well 10 might, but you might get a phone call from your first customer or your second customer or whoever saying, you know what, we believe in you. And it's not the bank, it's the customer saying, we're gonna hire you to solve this problem. And that sets your entrepreneurial terror and your breakdown level back, and then you charge up the next hill.
Yeah, it's like a daily thing. No, it happens all the time, right? I mean, anybody that's in business, I mean, you're coming up and I think, not picking on government people, but they've never had that, and I think that's the missing piece. When you have payroll due, and you look at your bank account and you don't have enough money to cover payroll, and you're wondering how in the world is this going to happen? And it does happen. For me, it's a lot of faith to get through it. And I've also noticed, like, remember I said I get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's it. I mean, it's never going to be really comfortable until look at Elon Musk, millions and millions of dollars in it, and he hasn't. So you'll find as you grow, you keep hitting ceilings, right? You get through that first one, you survive the startup. You think, oh, thank God I survived that. Now I'm okay. No, because now you're going to hit the next ceiling. Now it's okay, how do I grow again? How do I grow again? And that's where you need those people that have done it before. You know, how do you go, I got through startup, now how do I get to $500,000? How do I get to $1 million? How do I get to $5 million? How do I get to 10? And all those are all completely different companies. Your startup is completely different than trying to get to $1 million. $1 million company is totally different than a $5 million company, which is different than a $10 million company. It's just the problems get bigger, right? There isn't that off switch. So it's a regular deal. And the other thing I noticed is you have to be strong enough in your vision to stop all the insanity around you too, right? A lot of times our job is everybody else is panicking and they want to jump ship. They're like, oh my God, we're on the Titanic, here it goes. And we're like, no, we didn't. See, the problem with being an entrepreneur is if you're really an optimist, we can grow things really incredible. And I joke all the time about my employees. I don't know if they're there because it's a fun ride or if they're there to watch the fiery crash. But we like both, right? We like to see the rocket go off and we like a good crash too. And I think half the time people hang out with you to say, well, this is kind of cool, but let's see if the crash is even cooler. So it's just, you got to play the game in between there.
Yeah, anyone who runs a business, whether it's Wang or whether it's unfortunately when Johnny Carson passed away, and you reflect back on, you know, the discipline. I love Johnny Carson for what he did by humor, but unfortunately he had that one thing that I think that I have that keeps with me all the time, and that's my faith. And if you read his book, you'll get a chance to see kind of what he loved things, but he didn't carve in on himself enough. And I really feel I wish I could have met that guy. I could have had fun with him. But here's what I'll tell you. Here are the tools I use at my darkest moments. That's the first time I've ever been asked that question. One, I pause. Whenever I get into a point where there's an issue, I will pause, and I'll give you one. A salesperson walks in and says, hey, I just sold a $25,000 deal. You jump up, you high-five him, you ring the bell, you go, man, let's go to lunch. And your CFO walks in and says, we got a problem here. I go, what? He sold a system for our price. I go, whoa, what do you mean? $25,000 is what he sold it for, but $25,000 is what it's costing you. And you have to put the trucks on the road. That's a dark moment, especially when you got to pay 10% commission to a guy. Or he thinks he's going to get 10%. Okay? So, so you'll have those moments where, and it's all relative. You know, so you pause, and I give myself 24 hours. So think of it, you need to pause, and you need to remember that it's a thing. The other thing I think that's very important is this. There was a point where I was working so hard at running Tel-Tec that I had forgot why I created Tel-Tec, which was to take care of my family. And my wife said to me, you know, you haven't been to church in 4 Sundays. We haven't had dinner in 5. That's exactly how the bed went that way too. And she said, you know, you need to really look at your priorities. Like, what are you doing? She says, is this what you want? And here's the second thing I'll tell you. When you get to the point where you feel you are stressed, go serve someone else. What I use to do, I'll go to the homeless center. I may call somebody who says, hey, you know what? Let's go over and serve at CSUB barbecue or BC's barbecue. I mean, I'm not looking to get paid. I just want to just be the guy in the room that just washes the dishes like I did at Clark's, and don't ask me for anything. And my wife says, and don't give me any food. Just, you know, just go serve someone. And what you'll find is this, and this happens to me all the time. When you're out there running a business, whether you're making your first 1,000, or in this case, I'm managing 16,700 customers every day who call me because they trust me, They believe in me. They say, Morgan, well, he'll take care of it. And whether it's the homeless center calling me, or Chevron, or Era, or one of these people we serve, I treat them all the same. They trust me to do the right thing. So one, old-fashioned, don't take anything that don't belong to you. Ask before you do. And if you don't know, pause. You will have a dark moment. And as my wife says, well, when you do, what will you do? And for me, I go back to basics, and that is, I don't live for the job. Excuse me, the job doesn't live for me, I live for the, no, I got, basically, I live to take care of my family and my faith, and then my job works. So think about that, because when you're an entrepreneur, you do get blinded. And the banks know it, everyone knows it, because somebody who runs 24/7 trying to sell every day, but never sits down and balances the balance sheet, when someone says to you, is your cash in front of your expenses? You should know that question just like that. I can tell you ours, yes. And the moment when we had this $25,000 deal where it hit, this is what I said. I said to the salesperson, and I'll end on this because it's humorous. I said, you know what our margins are? You know what California taxes are? I hate California taxes over workers' comp, but I pause. And I said, you know the rule. How did you miss the target? You know what this person said? God bless him. He said to me, Morgan, I got caught up in the emotional moment of the sale. He just wanted the yes. He just wanted to close the deal, but he forgot the profit. I said, we're not non-profit. We are for profit. So I'll leave you there. I won't tell you the end of that story, but the moral of that story is once we sign it, we own it. So my attorney told me, so we got it.
Outstanding answers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give this board a round of applause.